The healing power of music, right? How many of you are feeling the Spirit in this very moment? I want to say, as much as I also own and hold that I will never let God down and I will work to never let God down, the reality is we can never let God down. And the reality is that God never lets us down. And so here we are to remember the ways in which God has gifted us, the ways that God has blessed us, not only by the experiences that we have been able to be a part of, but by the individuals, the people that have been a part of those experiences. And as much as I know that music heals, I'm also owning that talking about things heals. And talking about it. And I'm going to talk to you about something that I don't normally talk about, which is death. You don't hear much about it usually. I can't remember some of the times that I've heard, it being spoken from this platform. And the reality is that we've all had experiences with it. And we've all tried the best that we could to navigate through those experiences. And in us speaking about it, in us recognizing what is at hand through it, and also just recognizing where we're at with it, there is healing to be had. And I'm a little hesitant sometimes, or not hesitant sometimes, I was a little hesitant this morning even, I thought this was a good idea to talk about this. It being All Saints Day yesterday, and Dia de los Muertos, and the opportunity that there was to really remember and honor the people that have shaped our lives. And it's talking about death. And I still am not 100% sure how I personally even feel about it or the ways in which I understand it. Today I want to share with you some of what I do understand, but not in any way so that it has to be your understanding. Actually, I think that there is a beautiful mystery about death and what happens and the experience of it and our experience of other people experiencing it. And there is beauty in that mystery. And so I believe that that's part of it, that we can be with the mysteries of life and the mysteries of death. And just by being open to them, we can be blessed by them. Whether we are ready to be blessed by it now, or as we move through the grieving process or the mourning that takes place. Now, we talk about heaven and hell all the time at Unity on the Bay, right? We talk about it as a state of consciousness, which is a beautiful thing because that is really Unity 101, right? Like Unity basics, to talk about heaven and hell as states of consciousness that we allow ourselves to experience moment by moment. And because we focus a lot on that, we may not focus on the physical heaven and hell or beliefs around that physical or spiritual place that some people believe we go to after this life. Now, Jesus himself told us that heaven was a state of consciousness. He would share the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The very kingdom of God is in the midst of you. And so he shared with us that it was a state of consciousness that we would be able to tap into because it was always present, it was always there. We just simply had to be open to our experience of it. Charles Fillmore, Unity co-founder, said that heaven is a state of consciousness in which the soul and the body are in harmony with divine mind. So when we are in harmony with God, when we are in harmony with love, when we are in harmony with peace, when we are in harmony with grace, we are allowing ourselves to live in heaven. 20th century mystic Joel Goldsmith, he talks about this heaven, this spiritual kingdom that is within us as being even more real than the physical reality that we experience. Because anything that we know in the world of senses, anything that we see, that we smell, that we touch, at some point or another, it shifts, it changes, it disappears. But what always remains is that inner kingdom, that spiritual kingdom, that space within us that is the consciousness that we bring. And I don't know about you, but when I've had people move through their own transition and death, I like to hold on to the energy that they brought into my life, the love that I experienced through them, the peace that I was invited into by them. And the more that I really set my intention on just knowing those things about them and remembering those things about them, the more that I'm able to see them, those individuals, their presence, whenever I do feel love, whenever I do feel peace. Earlier I was sharing, right, like my two grandmothers who I loved very dearly, and my spiritual unity grandmother, Helen Vivian. So 3 grandmothers that have really shaped my life. You know, when I get very intentional about being present in the moment, that's when I can, you know, my 2 grandmothers love to cook, right? And so when there's Ecuadorian cooking happening at my house, right? And all of a sudden I'm able to like really be present to what's going on, that's when I have those flashes. Oh, here they are. Here are my grandmothers. Here's Helen when I'm out with angels everywhere doing things and really living into the legacy that they've left. Because that's what it is. Every single interaction that we have is our legacy that we are leaving implanted in the lives of others. Every single experience can be seen through the lens of, this is my legacy. And this is the legacy that I am living in this very moment, and this is the legacy that I will leave with somebody else. Not after death, but after that one encounter, so that they can experience more fully God's love. If I share my love, and that is the legacy that I leave, I love that leave and live. You know, sounds so similar there, right? But if that's the legacy that I leave with somebody, I know that they are able to live into love more fully because I've expressed it. I've modeled it. I've shared it just like others have shared and modeled it with me. Now, so how many of you have lived heaven on earth? How many of you have lived hell on earth? Isn't it so funny, by the way, it happened in the first service. When I asked people to raise their hand for heaven on earth, everyone's like, yeah. When I ask hell on earth, there's a little chuckling that happens, right? Because we've all experienced, we've all lived into it. And, you know, it's a great thing to be able to honor and to recognize the ways in which we are expressing, living into, and allowing others into our own heaven and earth. But what about the physical part? What about after this lifetime? What happens then, right? Well, first and foremost, as I said, this life and this experience that we're having, it can feel physical. It can be seen with physicality. And the reality of it is that it is all spiritual. It is all consciousness. That is at the foundation of what it is. So what I can tell you is I don't know exactly what happens after this lifetime, but what I can tell you is that before this lifetime, there was God. In this lifetime, I am living God, and whatever comes next will be God. That's the reality that I know. That's the reality that I want to really like anchor myself in. But is there like a pearly gate, right? Is St. Peter going to be there? People that have had near-death experiences, and near-life ones too, have shared that they go through a life review. Maybe that's something that we get to do. People that have come back from those experiences have shared that they've been told, wait, you've got more work to do, right? I know that Unity co-founder really invites us to recognize that in death, we can experience God also. And in the afterlife, God is fully present. She says, this is Myrtle Film, where Charles and Myrtle being our co-founders. She said, you will learn that those who go through the change called death are really passing through a transition, the soul giving up the body temple. Your dear one is not gone away anywhere. They abide in the heart of God, and you have learned that God is omnipresent. Like, take that in. Do you believe that we abide in the heart of God? Yes? Do you believe then that God is omnipresent? Well, if we believe that, then we're always in the heart of God, every single one of us, and all of us are always present at every moment of our experiences. It's our attention that brings about that recognition and that remembrance of those individuals that have touched us so beautifully and so dearly, leaving a legacy so that we can build on that legacy and leave it in somebody else also. From dust to dust, from God to God, from light to God. From light to light, God to God, dust to dust. There we go. There was a little girl who actually asked her Sunday school teacher, "Teacher, where do I come from?" The teacher answers, "Dust." She goes, "Teacher, where do I go?" "Dust." So the little girl goes home, and she screams out for her mom, and her mom comes running, and she's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" She says, "I don't know if they are coming or they are going, but there's a whole lot of people under my bed." See, even in a death conversation, I can throw in a joke. Yesterday, it's so interesting. Yesterday, I actually did a celebration of life service. It was for one individual who was with their partner for 47 years. It was beautiful, beautiful celebration of life. And one of the things that I share at these celebrations of life is a verse from John chapter 4, verse 1 through 6. It basically says that in our Father's mansion, in God's house, there are many rooms. To me, that is so comforting. Because to me, what it tells me is that I may not see the person that's in the other room, but they are there. And we are still dwelling in the same house. How many of you have experienced, my husband travels for work a lot sometimes, and, my son is in another room, and sometimes, the house gets a little empty, but there's a comfort. I don't have to see Lucas in the other room, but just knowing that they're in the other room in the same house lets me breathe a little easier, right? Lets me feel their presence. Do we allow ourselves to feel that same way with the ones that have passed on to the next iteration of life? To know that we always dwell in the same house, but just maybe a room away. And we don't have to see them to feel them. We don't have to see them to recognize that we are still living together in this very experience. Now, that verse has also been used to talk about reincarnation. And so there are people that believe in reincarnation. Actually, I found out this morning, about a third of Americans now believe in the potential for reincarnation. A third of individuals in the United States think that it's actually very likely that we reincarnate. The Fillmores believed in that also. Charles, of course, believed that he was the reincarnation of St. Paul. Because, you can't just be reincarnated by, the guy in the bakery. He's got to, think about the St. Paul one, right? But there is individuals that believe in reincarnation. I have to tell you, I lean that way, although I'm not too intentional about, thinking about it, right? Because, quite honestly, when we think about many lifetimes, the lifetime that came before me and the lifetime that came after me, to me, pales in comparison to the lifetime I get to live in this very moment. And what is that life that we are living in this lifetime? How are we using it to leave that legacy, to honor the ancestors, to honor that which has been implanted in us by all those loving people that have shared their love, that have been in relationship with us, and that have invited us to experience God's grace in different ways, sometimes in ways that felt really easy. And let's be honest, just because they've passed doesn't mean that we can't say sometimes in ways that were really, really hard, right? But it's all a wonderful experience that continues to, if we let it, invite us to recognize more of God and more of the truth of eternal life, which is energy can be changed, it is never taken away. Energy is always flowing through and as us and around us. And I know that as we prepare for the holidays, there are some people who will feel a little bit of that ache and that mourning of individuals that will physically not be able to celebrate the holidays with you this year, or that you may have not been able to physically celebrate the holidays with for many years. It still comes up. And what I want to say is, it's okay, and we can be gentle with ourselves through that. And to recognize that in the weaving of life and death, there is grace. Unity poet and writer James Philip Freeman says, the best way to look at life and death is to see them not as two separate subjects, but as one continuous experience, intertwined and indivisible, each containing the other, each forming out of the other and dissolving into the other, the little weave that is made. And like I said, I'm just sharing, some of what I'm thinking about or feeling through. I don't know exactly. What I do know exactly is that it's mysterious to me. And I'm okay with the mystery. I'm okay with not fully knowing, but also I'm okay with looking at, from what I know, what can I gather? What can I grow with? What can I hold? And how can I use it to live this life more fully and honor those that have come before me? I recognize that the physical transitions that people have made have left something within us. And we can be gentle with our mourning. We can be gentle with our grieving and recognize that grieving itself is an expression of love. We wouldn't be grieving if we hadn't loved. And so, as Francis Weller says, the work of a mature human being is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, to be stretched large by these two things. Grief in one hand, gratitude, and just feel how the heart expands in those moments when we fully open ourselves up and allow ourselves to feel those two things for the individuals that have come before us. Now, I recently did a wedding a couple of weeks ago. It was in Kansas City. It was a Unity minister and his now wife, Elise, Randy and Elise. And it was just really beautiful. It's an expression to me, of that openness. Because you see, they met in a very interesting way. Elise's father passed away a couple of years ago. She lives here in Miami. Her family lived in Kansas City, and she went to Kansas City to prepare, everything that needed to be prepared for the celebration of life service for her father with the rest of the family. And so they reached out because they wanted a spiritual but not religious person to do it, and somebody suggested that they reach out to this Unity minister named Randy. So Randy comes along, meets with the family. They actually felt a little bit of a spark between them. And, but of course, how could you do this, right, at a celebration of life service, right? Well, sure enough, a couple of days later, they have the celebration of life service, and as it is ending, and they're coming down the steps, Elise just couldn't contain it any longer, and she looks over at Randy and says, "Hey, do you want to go have dinner with me?" And Randy looks at her and goes, "Oh my God, I thought I was going to be so inappropriate, but you are stunning," is what he said. And sure enough, they ended up dating and getting married 2 years later. Now, what I want to share with you, what's so beautiful, and by the way, their love story is a love story. I mean, it's amazing. And what happened for Elise is that she was there working on celebrating the life of her father, who for her represented protection, comfort, being taken care of, being loved. That's the qualities that she was receiving from him. And she felt in the moment of the celebration of life service that her father was saying, here is how my love, my protection, my strength lives on. Can we be so open to seeing that even through our grieving, can we allow ourselves the awareness that that which we have received from the loved ones that have come into our lives is still being shared by others in their name, in their consciousness, in their own energy. And that is a beautiful thing to be able to tap into, and that is a beautiful thing to be able to grow and deepen and expand on. And that's one of the things that I really value about this process of understanding or recognizing or being at one with this process of life, that it invites us to live my life more fully, not just for my own sake, but for the sake of the legacy that's been left behind in me, for the sake of allowing those individuals that may no longer physically be with us to be able to live through me and that which I give to others. You know, I believe that all those individuals that came into my life made me know myself more fully, made me trust God more fully, made me know the fullness of God more fully, and made it even easier for me to step into the truth of who I am and the way that I then honor that is by making it easier for other people, by lifting other people up, by sharing those same qualities, by being those qualities that we received, being the qualities now that we share with others. And so how can we live a life that leaves a legacy? A legacy of love, a legacy of service, and a legacy of remembrance. It reminds me of Ram Dass, spiritual teacher. He had an overarching theme. His foundation is called Love, Serve, Remember. What higher purpose do we have than to love? To feel love, to express love, to be in the midst of love. And yes, it's such a tremendous opportunity that we have. And it is love that naturally leads us to those experiences of grief and those natural experiences of loss, because it is that which we love that we grieve for sometimes, right? And so the more that we allow ourselves to recognize this is all love, I can love myself through this process, I can love the individual through this process, and I can be more of love in remembrance of these individuals that have shared love with me, the more love expands. Khalil Gibran says, when you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Love is the cause of our grief, but love is also the antidote. And the question is, how can we be more of the antidote in the life? How can we lift each other up? How can we remember those that came before us and that which they did in us, and give it the honor and the sacredness that it is by living it out more fully in the world, to lift everyone up, to trust that as we love each other, we are loving those individuals that were always a part of our lives. That as we are of service to each other, we are honoring the way in which they were in service to us. And as we are remembering their truth, we can remember ours and living it out into the world. Again, life is never destroyed. Life is simply shifted and changed, and it changes us. So how are we living the changes that we got invited into? How are we allowing heaven to be lived by those around us? How are we making it more possible for people to know God's love, God's grace in all situations? And how are we loving, serving, and remembering in the honor of those individuals that have shaped our lives as we shape the lives of others? To me, there is no greater gift that we can provide in remembrance of a loved one than to be loved. And so the question remains, how will you live out that legacy? And as you are living it out, take a moment to be very present and to say to those loved ones that have always and will always be a part of your life, thank you for making it possible. The beauty of life, of death, and the way in which we journey through it. Unity on the Bay, what a blessing it is to share this life and everything that brought us to this moment with each of you. Namaste.